Here for a reaction is Ken Blackwell, the former mayor of Cincinnati. He also previously served as the U.S. ambassador to the UN Human Rights Commission. Ken, when we look at what's happening in Seattle, we've followed with you along this whole process for several weeks now. We're now seeing that the Seattle Council is taking some action. The mayor in particular is taking some action against the CHOP. Do you think it's about time she did this? And now does she face some other obstacles in doing so?
It's long overdue. And one of the lessons that you learn in life is that if you reward bad behavior, what you're going to get is more bad behavior. And up until this point, what we've watched in Seattle were local leaders, local officials rewarding bad behavior. They've destroyed civility in that city and put at risk the safety of their citizens and their property.
And, I think you bring up an interesting point because, I'm supportive of protests no matter what. It's the First Amendment right of people to do what they want. But when it comes to rioting, looting, and other acts of aggression and violence, that is something that I'm against. And I think most Americans are against it, too. And we see right now that, for example, statues are coming down. The lawmakers are reacting to some of the more acts of aggression, whether it be in Seattle, whether it be other places of the country. Does this set a bad precedent that says to the average American person that if you do respond aggressively, if you do riot or loot, you will get a response?
That's right, and that is what they put at risk, and that is civility and lawful dialogue, discussion, and even lawful protest. That's Protest is as American as apple pie, but what we can't stand is a destruction of the safety that the local officials in our cities are supposed to afford their citizens. They've sort of turned a blind eye to the vandalism, to the arson, and to the criminal activity, and what they've gotten is more of it. Hopefully, they're now coming to their senses.
And when we look at what's going on right now, too, I remember at the very beginning we were talking about outside agitators. It was some on the far left, President and as well as Attorney General Barr said Antifa. A lot of Democrats were saying that it's also far right agitators. The Boogaloo movement is, I believe, one that they're saying. It's kind of an anti-government group. But now we're hearing from the government, too, that when we hear outside agitators, we mean really outside. We mean foreign interference, such as countries like China trying to come in and kind of create discord among the American people. Is this something that you find is going to be a big problem, not only for this issue right now at hand, but maybe also going into the elections?
Once you allow this or council culture to take root, what you destroy is that old notion of e pluribus unum, from the many one. The fact of the matter is that we are the most prosperous, the most diverse constitutional republic in all of human history. But what is at the foundation of our progress is the rule of law. And now what we know is that outside agitators and inside menace are in fact destroying the rule of law. And that's something that local officials, state officials, and the federal government has to, in fact, guarantee is public. That is the first order of business from government leaders, and that is the provision of safe environments.
And can you bring up an interesting point, too? Because the president, we know that he's used the phrase law and order. So one would assume that he's doing that for not only bringing some calmness to this situation, but also hopefully he can get to November and look back and say, look, I tried to do what I could, but ultimately this was up to a lot of the states. This was up to whether it be governors, mayors, such as the situation in Seattle. Do you think that that is his approach so that when he gets to November, he could look back and say, listen, I made my stance very clear. I offered the assistance, but I didn't want to get involved in something that wasn't necessarily my problem, while at the same time highlighting what could go wrong in places like Seattle under Democratic leadership?
The president respects the Constitution and he respects classical federalism. He understands that the responsibility for public safety on the streets of our neighborhoods and our cities are local and state responsibilities. He has, in fact, not been afraid to say, we're here and we're ready to assist, whether it be to deal with better policing or to put a stop to the mayhem and the disorder that's besetting too many of our cities and our communities. What we're putting at risk are the lives and livelihoods of decent Americans, and nobody's going to stand for that. At least I don't think American voters will stand for that this coming November. And they're going to know who was ready to do the right thing and who did the right thing. That's the sort of leadership that people expect from not only the president, but from governors and mayors and township trustees.
Yeah, and I think it's a difficult thing for the media because they want to both sides this issue a little bit. But when it comes to rioting and looting, there really is no both side issue. I mean, the overwhelming majority of Americans don't want to see rioting. They don't want to see looting. They're on board with protests, but as soon as they get aggressive, no American wants to see that. They know who eventually suffers from that, and it's small business owners, it's immigrants, it's minorities in those communities as well. They know who suffers from that instance, but I think you're right on to say that that is the approach that the president wants to highlight come November. Ken Blackwell, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thanks for being with us tonight.